Well, the importance of goal clarity and purpose on the front end is that if you're not clear about that, you're going to be swayed along the way, and you may not end up where you wanted. As you involve every vendor, there's a lot of vendors in this space. They're good at what they do, but they all kind of come at it differently. And so it gets very confusing as you get multiple perspectives on what you should do. And in my experience, you get lost in the process of trying to implement something. That goes away, or is hard to do if you're clear up front what you want the end result to be. So are you doing this to better retain employees, number one HR issue this year, or is it to have a culture that's better at attracting employees, or are you focused on increasing performance towards strategic objectives or core values? If you're clear on that up front, it will help you sustain the process more efficiently. Christi, what's been your experience with that?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. So when I started working with Bob and Michael, the first thing we had to talk about was what was the pain? What pain are we having in the company? And that pain was around increasing engagement. We needed to make sure that our employees were engaged. We wanted to retain our top talent, and we had talent all over the globe, and we wanted to have them feel connected. We really needed to connect our remote workers, whether they were in buildings, separated by buildings or separated by geos or time zones. And then we really needed to retool and update our recognition program. It was outdated, people weren't using it, it was paper-based. It just wasn't cool and hip and fun. And so we started with those pieces to talk to leadership about what is the business case for setting up a program.
Yes, and another excellent. And I was gonna this keep moving. I've got a lot of commentary I can go, but we'll want to get through our content, and then we'll have more time for discussion. Part of the setup again on the front end is going to be better if you have a way to track and measure results. This whole topic, recognition, engagement, are slippery slopes. They mean a lot of different things. They mean different things to different people. They mean different things to different people and where they are in their career. It will vary based on the different cultures you have, the different age groups you have. So it's a slippery slope. We call it in the research that it's hard to get your arms around it. And so you have to have a way to measure a baseline. What is it now? What do we want it to be? And to move progressively towards that end goal. For this topic, one of the best measures is you got to ask people their opinions. You could do that in a survey, employee survey. Most companies do that annually or every 2 years. You can have, I remember, Christi, you did a specific focused impulse survey, just focused on this topic. That was very helpful for getting a bead on where it is now, where we want it to be. And even if once you have a baseline, even if it's like we're going to improve it, 10% a quarter or 10% a year, you're now moving in the right direction. That's very different than being stagnant and just saying, well, we don't know what impact it's having. We passed out Starbucks cards to people and they seem to like it, so let's do that again. That's kind of a random approach. If you're not, my professor Peter Drucker used to say, if you can't, or if you don't measure it, you can't manage it. So to be able to have this be an initiative that you manage to get better, to drive the culture that you want for the results you want, you have to have some form of measurement. So a survey, a pulse survey. We also did some focus groups. That was very, very helpful. And part of that is, again, the baseline part of it is just getting the story of what's the perspective of your employees, what's the voice of the employee, and having that be clear and up front. I remember at Qualcomm, just for example, that we had a hard time doing focus groups initially because management already felt that they knew what was important to people, and it's like it took a while before we did a focus group. I remember the first one we did, the results went to the executive team, and they came back and they said, wow, well, this is different than we thought. Do more focus groups. It was so what people have in their mind is the reality of the organization. What is a true reality? You got to retool and ground that to the reality of the employee perspective, which you can't get without asking them in some way.
Yeah, Bob,
Christi?
I think that it's so overwhelming as a person sitting in HR when you start this. And I think that the real key thing we focused on was retention. So we looked at that survey and we did an overlay. Who is likely to stay at the company? And of those people, how often are they getting recognized? And we had one slide that we must have shown in 100 different meetings, which showed people who got recognized on a daily or a weekly basis were much more likely to stay with the company. So those pockets where it was
I think the measure you had was for at least 3 years, the next 3 years.
I see myself here. I see myself a part of this culture for the next 3 years. And so showing that slide to top leadership, showing it to engineers, showing the connection between what has been perceived as soft skills or something that may be further down in the priority list, it was top of mind for employees. Are my employers seeing what I'm doing? Is my manager seeing what I'm doing because I sit in Singapore, I sit in Germany? Do they know what I'm doing? Do they see my value? Do I feel seen and heard? And so that piece, starting with that data and then being able to measure it on the back end after we launched the recognition program was really, really valuable to our leadership and also to getting some funding behind it.
So I want to make a very quick add-on to that, and for those again interested in some hard data on the topic of results tracking and impact, we did a study with one of our healthcare clients, monitoring the impact of recognition on the first year of an employee's experience in the company. And for those employees who did not receive any or much for recognition in the first 6 months of employment, were 70% more likely to voluntary turnover than the peers who received reasonable amounts of recognition during their first 70. So not only a reinforcement of the importance of doing it and doing it well, but the ability to capture data to then report back to finance on these are real hard numbers and hard impacts. This is happening.
On that research, Michael, because I remember that, I think one of the things that popped out that for in healthcare, half the population of healthcare is nurses, which are really hard to hire, really hard to keep, and there's an extreme shortage. We have over 1 million nurse shortage in our country, and what we found, I remember it popped out of that study that there was a straight line correlation between the amount of recognition nurses received and how long they stayed with the organization. So it was very systematic, and that's you don't usually get results that are that clear and powerful, and that's again makes the case if we want to keep our nurses, this is a ticket to do it. It's maybe not the end all, but it's a big piece of it. And really, what are you doing with this piece? You're making people feel valued for what they're doing, and if you're in healthcare, you joined healthcare to be in to save lives and do God's work, but all of a sudden you're up to your eyeballs in coding procedures and Medicare applications. You're pretty far from care, and so it's a reminder back, it's the people that make the work happen. We got to make them feel valued for the job they're doing. That's the best ticket to keep them. Our next point, how to actively engage top management in the program success. Critical program. Of course, anytime you can hook things to upper management, the whole thing goes easier because they're calling the shots. And to have that support from the CEO and from other key executives is critical, and that should be part of the planning on this. You got to target who's going to be our connection to the executive team, who's going to be our advocate, and Christi, I was very impressed how you were very good at this. I think it's her natural exuberance that was contagious inside the company. But what's your reflections on that?
Yeah, I mean, my reflections are whoever you put in charge of this initiative has to have a lot of energy, has to feel real ownership, has to believe in recognition themselves as a manager, as an HR leader. And there's it can feel risky going into big meetings where people aren't on board. So that stakeholder engagement from the beginning is so important. It can't be an HR program. Whoever your HR person is has to align with some top leader. And that top leader may not be obvious, but it's someone who does this well. So we pulled from the engagement survey, what leaders have the top scores in terms of they would be recommended by their employees. They have a high intent to stay. They have a high favorability score. They're already doing this, and finding that key SVP, that head of marketing, that C-suite executive who does this well, and really bringing them along on the journey and having them start to tell the story is very different than HR being the voice of this program.
Yeah, I concur. You can't drive this from HR. HR can do a lot to support it, but it has to be a aligned initiative, which means you have to get their attention, buy-in, and active support. I remember at Qualcomm, we had the gentleman in charge of 5G and cell phone technology really grabbed hold, and that was critical. And because he's going to be a role model, and what he does, his downlink will do, his direct reports will do, and that's exactly what happened. That I think at the first 90 days. Five of the top users in the program that we set up at Qualcomm were VPs and an executive VP, which is, boy, it's so much easier to drive it from the top than to try to bubble it up from the bottom. And then you get to a point. I work with some organizations where they say, well, it ends up being do as I say, not as I do. You guys do that. We're too busy. We're too important to. Boy, it's never gonna be an integrated part of your culture if that's the case where you are, where the top management is dismissive of it. That's this people thing. Yeah, that's, you know, I'm convinced the larger organization gets, the more the people who drove the success of the business become a line item in the budget. We're trying to squeeze that line item, and we gotta keep the voice and the people alive, because as to why we're doing this, why they want it, why it will help us to not only retain them, but to attract more like-minded, talented people.
If I may, add a perspective to the audience and to add on, Dr. Bob and Christi, what you shared, I think there's a few things. One, we empathize with the challenges coming from HR to convince leadership. Sometimes that can be daunting. I'll add a few things just as a perspective. One, I believe times are changing. Certainly the influence of the last few years and the changing economic and workplace environment is consequential, so that people and leaders are more aware. Two, I believe the leadership class, so to speak, that are coming through the organizations have somewhat of a different mindset and are more open to these things than perhaps they were 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, etc. So if you've tried it before and struggled, I don't necessarily think it's the same world and the same types of, at least, approaches in leaders. And I think through the availability of data and hard data to support the importance of this makes the approach to leadership a little bit easier if, again, you've tried this in the past and felt that you were getting resistance. We emphasize it's not easy, but it's very doable and impactful.
Well, one of the underlying trends on that affects all this is the different generations in the workplace. Right now, we got 4 generations, and by 2025, just a couple of years, 75% of your workers, wherever you are going to be from the millennial or Gen Z generations. And they have a very different outlook on work and their role in it and their expectations. And being known to their management, having their management on their side, being thanked for doing a good job is not inconsequential for those people. So that's, I think, driving it. And that, on the plus side of that, is we have more managers now from the millennial generation, I tend to think they have a better appreciation for this, because and so that's helping the trend on making recognition more commonplace. True recognition, true meaningful recognition, which has to be specific to the individual. And given by someone they hold in high regard, typically starting with their manager, but increasingly from a peer. And even, some companies get good at looping in the customer as well, and certainly upper management is critical. So it's the game is changing. It's getting a little bit, I think, a little bit easier in some ways, a little bit harder in other ways. Christi?
100%. I talk about generations a lot, and when we would hit some of that resistance, because we had a lot of baby boomer and some Gen X leadership. So they come from a different time, a different place, a different leadership style. And we kept hitting a challenge with them. And there was a lovely moment when the chief engineer said, my kids would really be into this. And that helped us say, that's who we're hiring. We're hiring your kids, right? We're hiring Gen Z, we're hiring millennials. And it started to move the needle I saw there were some change management folks on the call. It was a critical point in the change curve when the leadership started to see that this is really not about them or what was meaningful to them 20 years ago. This is really about now and moving forward with the generation that we're hiring, who needs daily and weekly recognition for.
And the thought that you paid your dues, so they should pay their dues, is not going to fly. Let me just assure you that the younger generation is not focused on paying their dues. They're focused on having an exciting job now, feeling valued for doing that. And if you're not willing to do that, they're going to move on. The average tenure for a millennial right now is 1.8 years. For Gen Z, it's 1.6 years. It's going down. Currently in the workforce, about 40% of all workers are looking for new jobs. So again, if you don't want to be spending all your time just hiring, recruiting, and staffing, you got to camp out how you treat the people you have so they stay longer. So that's less of an issue. And you get more from them as well. So again, it's making this case that the soft fuzzy topic, blue smoke and mirrors HR topic, really has teeth to it. It really has traction. It can drive the hardest edge objectives you can come up with in your organization if you have the machinery set up to do this, and you can roll from one thing to the next. And I've worked with organizations that have perfected this, and they become just a performance machine where they don't have to spend half their time trying to get people that aren't out there. That have an extreme shortage in skilled labor in our country right now. For everyone that's unemployed in our country, there are 2 available jobs. Now, it may not be in their area. It may not be with skills that they have, but again, it's not a shortage of bodies. It's a shortage of skilled labor. So treating those that you have is going to be easier than having to replace them every year and a half.
So let's put this for a moment back into the context of the 7 steps. So we've got a plan, we've got our vision for what the program is, we've got leadership engagement and excitement and interest. We've built a great tech platform with WorkProud or another vendor or something in-house. You now got to bring this forward and bring this to life. What is this idea that you guys have done, and I've seen you deploy so successfully? What is this idea of an ambassador network? What's its purpose? How do you create it, and what are the impacts of doing that? Maybe share some of your experiences. That'll be very helpful for everybody.
Well, it's a great point that you make, Michael, because I see so many organizations that they have a committee that sets up we got to get a vendor review, and then they spend half year, a year doing that and unrolling it, and then they kind of feel, often it kind of seems to me like they feel their job's done when they plop it on the organization, and then they're surprised that no one's using it. What's up with it? It's like you left everyone in the starting blocks is what happened. You've got to. It's not just having the tools, whether they're gift cards or points or trips to Hawaii, whatever it is. The tools are one thing, but you got to have the communication and get the word out and support it. And so a great way to do that is, we already talked about upper management. That's critical, but you can get actually the average employee, you can involve them for their area. And Christi, I really hand it to you, because you were so good at this, at taking this idea of this start with the people we know that are into this, and I know you used executive assistants was one of the key groups, and other people that you handpicked to be involved. But then you opened it up to whoever would like to be an ambassador for your area, represent this topic in your area, your department, your division, and then with it an obligation to keep them up to speed, know what's going on. It was just brilliant. It was just brilliant, and it just steamrolled. It got better. More people wanted to do it. So say more about how that all came about.
Sure, and I think it's important to know that how we launched the ambassador program is different than how we sustained it. So there's this really important inflection point at launch where you need people to get on the platform and start doing the behavior. And whether you're in a company of 50 people or 3,000 or 40,000, you already know where some of this energy is in the company. And so we picked those people who were head of our Black and Latina and LGBTQ resource groups. We picked the executive assistants who have a lot of positional sway with their leaders. We picked people, the security guard at the front desk who greets everyone every day, who has that natural connection point. We picked, we found that the audit department had great scores in this area, and we empowered them. So we gave everyone who we knew would either be high users or could be needle movers. We gave them extra points at the start. We named them ambassadors, sort of like the Pygmalion effect. We assumed that you're good at this, we're gonna see you thrive.
And you set them up to win. You set them up to do it well.
And to shine. And we gave them special trainings. We gave them special swag. We had a special place for them to meet. They had a little bit of a budget. So we really empowered those energy nodes across the organization to be extensions of ourselves, because we can't be everywhere.
Soldiers, the front line. Yeah.
But that is different from how we continued, because once we launched the program, then we looked at the data. Who are the top 50 users of this program? Let's find them, let's feed them, let's create this idea of bounty. So we gave those people more points, right? So we didn't know where they were, but as soon as we launched, then we could identify the actual behavioral use of the program and incentivize those people. Some of the original ambassadors stayed on, but it changed. And then every month looking at who's the highest user and how do you continue to give that feedback and give them more tools to be your ambassador group.
In fact, if I recall, you actually moved to a group of having super ambassadors that were the high users, and let's make sure we're supporting them well, but also let's put them on a pedestal because they're helping to drive this initiative for all of us. And so working both sides of it to make them valued, to give them what they need to have. I know they had special access to get questions answered. That I think that was very helpful.
They did. We had them do a video where we invited them to do a video, and it was global in our case, to talk about how they recognize people both on and off the platform. And so they got some limelight. They got some credit with their managers for being great ambassadors. So yes, it has to go way past launch. It cannot be set it and forget it.
And what's so cool about that is then you have someone, you can't just drive this from headquarters, you got to get out into the trenches, and who better to do that than people that are already there. So I know, like when I worked with Cargill, the largest privately held company in America, they had a recognition champion at each of their manufacturing plants in North America. And they even got them together. I remember speaking to them, or Bank of America. I spoke to all their recognition champions. Same type of concept. They just put a different name on it, and this helped to equip them to do the best job because they're the ones that are driving this initiative for all of us. We're hopefully we're going to pull into every leader to have them do it, and upper leaders, but to have someone out in the trenches that is putting on the agenda of the local meeting, is bringing in examples, is giving some awards. Is keeping it front of mind is critical to have this roll out and get stronger with each month, not to be plopped on and then die, which I find happens in a lot of organizations. To have it get actually better.
Different things work in different environments. We had people in manufacturing. We had to give them tools to do walk around recognition, right? That's different than online because those people were in the fabs. We had to translate some things into Japanese. We got that feedback. We had ambassadors who started something called Thank You Thursdays, right? So not only did we empower them, they came back to us and helped us iterate on the program.
and to expand your best practices within the organization. Again, what better? I find most companies don't do this. They don't. They set people up and they don't do anything to help each other. You know, so to get them together and have them connect and communicate is perfect. To get their ideas to help make it better, because they're trying and using different things, and to share that is all helps to move the needle and to grow the momentum for this being a more powerful driver in the organization.
So I think, Bob and Christi, you both done that fantastically in the executions we've had the benefit and joy to witness. We can share with you that the work that Christi did and Bob several years ago continues to pay significant dividends, with an ever increasing participation and engagement rate in the programs they built and established. And this is 3 years post-launch, because they put these fundamental elements together, getting leadership buy-in, and now in this case, remembering to take this program into the population and get it out of an HR's responsibility by creating a construct of an ambassadors network, and how you do it, and with points and with prizes and with competitions or with recognition champions, that will change. But the importance of bringing it out into the population and having these ambassadors, which are your representatives, to carry the culture forward into the organization, is a fundamental enabler for success. We can certainly see that in the projects they were both involved in.
Just a tangential add-on to that is that, you know, I find, like I mentioned, for a lot of companies, they plop a program on the company and then expect it to magically take off. And I find, you know, something as simple as getting people on the platform, you can't take for granted. So, well, get on when they get on. It's like, no, you got to drive that. You got to drive that early on to make that. If you're 3 years in, 3 years into the program, and you're still trying to get people to get on the platform for the first time, you missed it. You know. So I worked with one company in Buffalo, and they healthcare. And I challenged them. I said, you know, the vendor that they had, I asked them, well, what's the fastest implementation you ever had where you got everyone on the program? And they said, well, one company, we got, you know, like 47% on the platform within the first quarter. I go, and I told them this. I go, I think you guys can do better. I think you can get 100% people on the platform the first day it's available. And I challenged them, and they took me up on it. And they did a big thermometer, and hourly they measured how many people had gotten them. And in the first day, they had everyone get on the platform. Well, now it's going to save you a lot of trouble, because they have to spend 6 months trying to get people, coax them to get on it. Now they're all on it already. They know it's there, and now we can shift to increasing the frequency. So I thought that was brilliant. Again. Put the challenge out there, make it a goal, and have fun. They had fun with it too. You know, they gave out prizes hourly and the department that had the most people were 100%. You know, the first department to do that. And so you create the story as you go. You know, I just wanted to add that. Christi?
Yeah, I mean, I think that fun goes into the next this idea of, yeah, so maybe we talk about enthusiasm and keeping it going. I think that's the piece. And I think what's so hard is it has to be playful. If there's anything in your suite of offerings that could be fun and playful, this is it. And so if you can bring that energy, it's super important. And it can be small things. I remember, Bob, we put stars next to people who are recognition ambassadors on the platform, just a gold star. And just that badging, that sense of being part of the group, people would say, how do you get a star? How do I get a star? And and then that would lead into, you have to use the program more, and here's how you do it. And so that kind of visibility, especially in a big company or even in a big department, to just really pull out those people who are giving the recognition, not just the people receiving it, but we spend a lot of time focusing on who are the practitioners, who are really good at this. And oftentimes it paid dividends, because if people were recognizing people, then the recognition would come back. So,
and for any of us, you know, the biggest change of our behavior is is following the behavior of someone else that we learn from, whether it's our parents or managers. So that's part of the contagious part of it. As people are doing it, they're practicing it, other people are exposed to it, and it gets them on board as well, because it feels good to be recognized. It actually feels good to recognize other people as well. And I know a lot of leaders that don't do it never get to experience that joy. And if they're dismissive, then they can't get, not only are they not getting the value for the activity, but they're not getting better at it because they're not doing it at all. So in my dissertation, I found that, getting them in the game, try it, you might like it, and finding ways to get them in the game is critical. And again, nothing beats the pure excitement and enthusiasm of the people that are rolling it out. So again, you were queen at that, Christi, and it was very contagious and getting other people very excited about the program as well.
Thank you. I think part of it, though, is we were working with engineers and we had to give them clear steps. So we passed out these cards. How do you give recognition? Step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. You really need to know your audience and make sure that you're speaking the language that they can understand and they feel empowered and safe to try this, especially if it's a new behavior.
And just to add on to that, with engine, there's personality types are a big part of this. And if you're dealing with engineers, there may be they may naturally, not to overgeneralize, but they're probably going to be more more inner focused, more work focused, more technical, and introverted, I think, and that's okay. You can do this from any personality type, but you have to have an overlap in what they're willing to do given their personality. And again, you got to start with what the people want. So if you got employees that want personal praise, and you have engineers that don't think that's their job and they're not comfortable doing it, then you got to work with them to make it comfortable. And it's okay if, I remember dealing with a CEO in Manhattan, and he goes, I just can't tell someone to their face they're doing a good job. And I said, well, you don't have to do that, but you have to do something. So let's go through the book here and find some ideas you can do. And because if they don't see an overlap on what they're willing to do, it's not going to happen. So a technical engineer, if you're not good praising someone to their face and they're embarrassed about doing that, they feel silly or whatever, maybe jotting a note that, what is that, you could leave it on their desk, maybe put it on the agenda, starting the meeting with a call out of something that went well. Ask for other people. Does anyone else have any praisings? Those are practical and effective strategies that I see companies use. So you gotta grab hold and get in the game and learn from the managers that are doing it, because it's going to vary with the organization. So there's a lot of moving parts on this, and motivation is a moving target. It does change for any of us individually, and changes for the nature of the organization and where things stand and where are you in your growth cycle. And so it's you got to work with it in progress to how can we get higher utilization, more people involved, a greater frequency to drive the results we want.
Yeah, there isn't an employee in a company that doesn't appreciate being thanked for their efforts and contributions, whether it's public or private. The question of how do you build engagement and enthusiasm across the whole population, managers and employees and executives, you're going to approach them at a fun level, as Christi had articulated. This is a fun way to do things, and fun is part of the work experience. But I want to add an interesting perspective and a different approach that you can also consider to encourage people to say thanks and to acknowledge. Whether you use the word recognition is up to you. There was a study from George Mason University and Wharton, a copy of which I can get out to the audience, but it was an interesting perspective on this question. And what the answer was they were driving for in this question was, what managers are people likely to stay working for? Ones that take all the gratitude themselves, or ones that articulate that they're part of a team and that the team is part of the success or the reason for the success? The answer is obvious, we know that. So the question is, well, how do managers actually demonstrate that they're not taking all of the credit for the work that the employees have done. They do public recognition and public thank yous, etc. And the study shows empirically that those managers had significantly higher retention rates that did more frequent acknowledgement, recognition, and thank yous to the group. So again, sparking recognition or engagement in the program is going to be a dimensional from fun to tactical to, yes, you should do this. And of course, there's lots of evidence for this. I apologize for interrupting.
No, fine. In fact, that reminded me of another study I read recently where they looked at, again, why people leave, and they found that on one variable made a difference of 17% between people leaving and staying. 17% more people stayed if they answered yes to this question: my manager takes a personal interest in my career. Wow. So recognition takes a lot of different forms. And one of the long games in recognition is I'm here to support you getting ahead, to get the job done. And work is, again, Peter Drucker defines manager as getting the work done through others, not being a super worker, not being a micromanager, but getting the work done through others. So that's where your focus is, on helping people as best you can. And one of those variables is what's next for them. After recognition, I think career development is the next reason why people leave or why they stay in organizations. And that should be part of every manager-employee conversation on your one-on-ones to what do you want to do next? Where do you want to be 5 years from now? And how can I help you get there? I can't guarantee you'll be promoted to the job you want, but I can guarantee you if you work for me, we're going to get you the skills and exposure and visibility to put you in line for that job you want. And that's a promise any manager can make and should make, I feel, at a personal level, because it's not, the faster you can make it from just a job to a career, the longer, the employees can think about staying and working for the organization. So number 6 here, how to hold leaders accountable for their ongoing involvement. Critical step. I like to talk about in terms of positive accountability. Accountability kind of has a negative word. You're going to force people to do something. It's like, well, you can do it in a positive way. You can do it by celebrating people that are good at it, putting them on a pedestal, making a focal point that we can follow them, we can learn from them. If you have a manager's honor roll for people that are doing a certain amount of recognition, maybe just giving out one recognition this month, they go on the honor roll, because they're in the game. And then you can have kind of a fun competition if you have a leaders board on who's doing this the most, and have fun with it. Talk it up and maybe interview some of those top managers. Show a video interview or interview and post it on your website to learn from those people that are doing it. One of the things about recognition, a lot of it is very personal. So someone that could be good at it, and most people don't even know they're doing it because they're doing it with their direct reports, and they're great to work for, the conversations, but you don't often hear what they're doing outside that relationship. And so I remember working once with AAA, Southern California, and I was talking to 300 executives, and the head of the department on a break, he said, "Oh, I really appreciate what you're saying," and he told me this story about he wrote a letter to someone in the field, and 3 weeks later he was out and he saw his card, his thank you card, posted in front of her desk, and she was just kind of blown away by it, and he didn't realize the impact that it had to her. And I'm saying, you got to tell your group this. Don't tell me this. And he goes, "Oh, no, this is your program." And so, of course, when we got back together, I started to tell the story, and I kind of deferred to him, and then he told it. You could have heard a pin drop in the room, because if this is the top leader is saying he's taking the time to jot notes to people on what he sees when he sees them doing an excellent job wherever they're located, man, no one else has excuse not to do this. And it was very, very powerful. And this is what I find. So an accountability is holding those leaders. It's really getting to the point of saying, if you work for our organization and you're a manager, we expect you to do these things. This is one of the big things I've seen change in the last decade on this topic. It used to be when I asked people about recognition, I get a response like, it'd be nice if my boss did something every now and then. If they said something, that would be great. He doesn't, she doesn't, but it would be nice if they did. And that has shifted in just the last decade, that now the employees say they expect to be recognized. They expect to be thanked. They expect to be, when they do a good job. Yes, even if it's what they're being paid for, it doesn't mean for them to do their best work, they've got to be valued for it. You can't say, well, we pay above industry average, so that should be good enough. Let me tell you, that's a ticket to have people, head for the exits, because no one's just working just for money. They want to be valued as well, and it comes down to the simple interactions from the people they most hold in high regard, starting with the manager, peer to peer. Upper management is great. The visibility of that is wonderful.
Yeah, the management piece, Bob, is so critical. It can be fun for employees. You can have ambassadors, managers. We had dashboards for managers so they could see, how am I doing against my peer managers? How is my team doing? That constant feedback loop. And then we had leaders for a leaderboard, and we shared that every month. And we said, this division, the legal division, is winning in recognition, right? They are giving the most. And so you will never bring along all of the leaders in the beginning. There will always be the naysayers. But as this goes through the change curve, and as people start to adopt it, and as you start to see those numbers in the engagement survey, which is really the magic, right? You see the engagement survey numbers go up and people feeling recognized. That's when you'll bring along the naysayers and the people that might have not been there in the beginning. And you better be ready for them, because they'll then want to do it, and they'll want to fund it, and they'll want to do it in creative ways. So it's really being strategic about getting the people who have the energy and get it in the beginning, and then showing proof of concept, and then bringing along the rest of the folks.
When I worked with Bank of America, they had 210,000 employees at the time, and I remember vividly that the head of commercial lending completely bashed the program. What a joke! The things that they want us, the things that they come at us with out of HR, it's like we don't have anything to do, and just openly laughing at it. And we set up part of the accountability we set up. That's kind of an information communication and accountability. Is that each month in the leaders meeting company wide, we had a leaders board of here's what the different divisions are doing. And the first time we did that, commercial lending was on the bottom of the stack, and the senior VP stormed out of the meeting. We will never be on the bottom of anything that's put in front of the leaders of this organization. And so he went from being completely blowing the whole thing off and laughing at it to becoming our biggest advocate, because he and sure enough, we knew we had him when like a few months later he called to check on the results before we had him published. he won, because they'd been working on it, and they became one of the biggest users. This is what I find too, that people have a lot of energy on this, and unfortunately there's a lot of old line management thinking where it's a waste of time, we shouldn't have to do this, we're paying people. I personally don't have time, I'm busy, and we gotta challenge that train of thought and say, maybe 1920s it was like that, but today I got to tell you, people they do need this, they want it. It does make a difference in how they perform and bringing their A game to the job each and every day. It does lead to that, and that's why we stake that out to begin with. And as we drive this, tying it to the success we're having is important to make the ongoing commitment real. So and the last point here is strategies for sustaining and enhancing program success. I think any initiative, you've got to do checkpoints where you review where we stand against our goals, and you learn from that. You debrief what has worked well, what can we do even more to double down, what hasn't worked, where are the pockets of people we haven't gotten to, who are the managers that haven't yet done this yet, and we've been talking about it. How do we get them on board, and is that giving them, you know, for the next month, if you haven't, we send a message to just those managers. If you haven't done a recognition and from our records in a couple of months, here's a special budget of points to use for the next quarter, to get you in the game, to remind you this is a goal of the organization. I worked with Florida Hospital in Orlando, one of the largest hospitals in the country, and I remember they had measured, you know, where they stood on this. They did the Gallup, and Gallup, one of the Q12 variables. The Q4 is, have you been praised or recognized by your manager in the last 7 days? And they were, you know, Gallup says everyone's off, you know, in the basement on that one, but they wanted to improve that. And so what we did is said, well, here, you know where your managers stand. So let's take everyone, all your managers that are below average on this variable, let's make them a special case and focus on them over a period of time. I think it was like 6 months where they had an ambassador from the recognition team would call on those managers and share the feedback from their employees, their employee surveys, and talk about the new elements of the program, and basically say, what's it going to take to get you in the game here? You know, and you know, Jerry Johnson used to have the same concerns that you've just mentioned over in production. And now he's one of our biggest users. Maybe I can get you together with him for lunch to talk about why he's gotten on board and what's done to their performance and their ability to retain and the ease in hiring. You know, yeah, I'll get together with. Yeah, I'd love to have lunch and talk about that. So whatever it takes to get them in the game, to make the appeal, to show them the data, to challenge them, to show them how to compare against others, and remind them the expectation of upper management is that all leaders need to be doing this, you know, so it's no longer optional. It's I think all that is part of the debriefing, pegging what you've learned and how to do better, and then dealing with what isn't working, and breaking through on that is how you sustain the whole thing to be even stronger each quarter going forward.
So, Christi, do you have any additions to comment or share about your perspectives in?
I do. I mean, looking across the various participants on here, lots of people had questions about culture and where this fits in the strategy of HR, right? So we have lots of things to focus on: talent acquisition and learning and development and training. I would argue that this should be the overarching strategy, that you could plug so many programs into this. It sometimes goes to 3rd or 4th place on your HR docket or in your funding docket, but when I've had 2 incredible experiences launching this at global companies, and things plug into this. You can tie it into the onboarding process. You can tie it into new manager training. You can tie it into external PR. You can tie it into retention. So I would argue
learning
that
and training,
earning and training, badging. If you build it right, and if the program is nimble enough, this can really be a framework where you can plug all of your other programs into. So instead of looking at this as a standalone, I would argue, look at it as an overarching strategy and go to your CFO with that kind of an argument, because it does need to be funded. It does need to be staffed. And then you do need the support of the HRBPs and the CMO and learning and development and the comms team and graphics design. There's just a lot of pieces that you need to help support a recognition strategy to change the culture in your companies.
It answers a question: is saying thank you an enabler for further positive behaviors? And I don't believe anybody is going to argue against that. It is then developing systems, processes, and methods to organize the way thank you and appreciation and recognition is done at scale in various different flavors and sizes. Now, we're coming right to the end of this. You know, I'd love to create opportunities for further conversation. There was some 40 or 50 questions, and I said I'd group some of them thematically. And again, Bob, Christi and I will work to send some follow-ups to everybody.
And if you submitted a question, we will give an answer. We'll write up answers to all the questions and distribute those to everyone that's been with us today.
But one of the big questions or themes related to remote, and we know we all believe that's not going away. So Bob or Christi, where do you see the relevancy of this kind of initiative in a construct where a large portion of the population is either global in different time zones, in different offices, or remote?
Yes, and right now about a third of all employees are working remotely. 50% say their job could be done 100% remotely, but right now it's about a third. More than that would like to work remotely, but their company, big focus on the companies now is to get people back to the office, because as we're paying for the space, we better use it, type of thing. And which I would challenge to say, well, maybe you should sublease. If you don't need the office anymore, then get rid of it. And but instead of clinging to, we got to go back to how it used to be. We're not going back to how it used to be. Virtual work is here to stay, guaranteed. And I've got a 25-page list of companies that hire virtual employees, and people ask me for that all the time, because it's like someone that's working virtually, if they no longer feel valued, or if they feel like they're in an outpost, they're out of sight and less out of mind, then their attention is going to drift. When they have a bump in the road on a project with a leader, they're going to very quickly look to elsewhere to find another job. And if you're telling them they have to come back to work, the average right now is 1 to 3 days out of 5. It tends to be the norm, but some companies are saying, no, everyone's got to be back. And I really question that, because if you got your CEO saying, I want everyone, I remember the head of Mellon Banks, I believe in New York City, said, if you can go out to dinner in New York City, you can come to the office in New York City. I'm going, well, bravo. That's easy to say, but if half his population has moved out of New York City because they supported virtual work, now you're going to ask them to move back into downtown. I don't think that's going to happen. They're just going to get another job for another virtual company. We know it works. People are actually more productive working virtually. So you got to embrace it. And so, a long story to get to the point of, to not have people feel out of sight, out of mind, you got to connect with them. You got to know what they're doing. You got to acknowledge when they've done a good job, and you got to celebrate that. And having the platform, having the tools, taking the time to do that. In fact, in the short term with the pandemic, actually employee engagement shot up, because for a lot of managers, for the first time, they had to call people at home to see how it was going and what they're working on. And that attention made the employees feel special, and they felt more engaged in the short term anyway. I think that drifted after that. But
and I think we're all sort of remote. I mean, even if you're in person, we had great success using the app. So when you're walking between meetings, you might be in a different floor, you might be in a different division. Remote means something different, but having some high-tech solution where you can quickly and easily say thank you, not for showing up, but for performance. And I just think, I know a lot of the questions are around culture. A culture of performance and appreciation for performance, I think, is really what the core of this conversation is.
And the culture means everyone does it.
Yes.
It's not if you happen to have a good manager, you get it, and everyone else doesn't get it. That's a very lumpy culture. And then the people that have a bad boss, and it's only 1 out of 3 or 4 you'll have in your career that you'll feel are a good manager. If we can raise the ante to have all leaders to have a certain level of competence and commitment to doing this topic, then now we can say that's the culture. And the culture, we're always taking time to call out success, to thank people, to celebrate successes. That's who we are. And at some point you cross the invisible line, and that is who you are, and it becomes self-sustaining. So I've worked with some great companies they've made that move, and now it's not just a program, but it's really who they are, and now it's going to stick around for a long time. You have a lot of benefit from it.
That's a great way, Bob, to end it for everybody on the hour. Please join me in thanking Bob and Christi for taking the time and sharing. As I mentioned, we will get a response to the question and answers. We will get information for getting copies of Bob's book shipped out.